Welcome, fellow historians, to a journey beyond the known chronicles of the Imperium. We often speak of Paul Atreides, the rise of the God Emperor, and the scattering. The forgotten lore, decipher the cryptic symbols, and piece together the epic sagas that shaped humanity's destiny among the stars. Subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss our first expedition into the deep past. The spice isn't the only treasure Arrakis holds.
In the shadowed halls of Khitan, where the marble floors reflected more lies than light, an emperor ruled not with honor, but with hunger. Shaddam Corrino IV, the last great lion of the Golden Lion throne. They say he commanded a universe with a single decree. But the truth is sharper. He did not rule because he was strong. He ruled because everyone else feared being weak. The Landsraad bowed. The Spacing Guild watched. Even the Bene Gesserit, whisperers of destiny, moved with caution. For the Emperor's power was not his armies, nor his crown, nor his sigil cast in gold. His power was the trap he built around them all. A web of alliances held by suspicion, a throne defended by paranoia, a peace maintained only through the promise of war. This is the tale of a ruler who conquered without swinging a blade, and yet lost everything the moment a blade was finally drawn. The chronicles call it a strategy. History calls it inevitability. But beneath both lies a harder truth. What if the greatest throne in the Imperium was never a power, but the prison built to protect it? Power is a cage, and the one who sits at its center often rattles the loudest. In every age of the Imperium, rulers dreamed of eternity, but eternity demands sacrifice, freedom, trust, even the soul itself. Shaddam IV understood this better than any emperor before him. Not as a philosopher, not as a saint, but as a player of the oldest game, the game of fear. In those days, the Imperium glittered like polished gold, yet beneath the shine lay a fracture line running through houses great and minor. The Landsraad wanted influence. The Spacing Guild wanted security. The Bene Gesserit wanted their Kwisatz Haderach. And in the middle of their ambitions stood one man, crowned by birthright, terrified by destiny. So he crafted a throne made not of power, but of pressure, pitting houses against each other, feeding rivalries like oxygen to a slow-burning fire, never strong enough to destroy, never weak enough to fall. He became the fulcrum of suspicion, the mind behind the mask. And the empire obeyed not because it loved him, but because it feared the world without him. Tonight, we follow his footsteps through shadow and ceremony. We will see how a monarch turned politics into a weapon, and how that weapon eventually turned on him. The tone shifts, slower, heavier, like steps echoing inside a vast throne hall. In the beginning, before the tragedy of Arrakis reshaped destiny, before the whisper of Muad'Dib, there was a golden lion throne and a boy born to inherit it. Shaddam IV, son of Elrond IX, heir to a legacy older than most civilizations remembered. The Corrino line, forged in fire during the Battle of Corrin 10 millennia earlier, had ruled unbroken. A dynasty built on the ashes of thinking machines. A dynasty blessed by victory, cursed by expectation. From childhood, Shaddam learned what power looked like, but not what it cost. He watched his father rule from behind velvet walls, attended by mentats, guarded by Sardaukar whose very breath carried the iron scent of Salusa Secundus. History paints Elrond IX as aging, brittle, decadent, but the boy saw something different. He saw fear dressed in ceremonial robes. A man wrapped in authority like armor, desperate not to bleed. And so, young Shaddam made his first silent vow. Never show weakness. Never reveal hesitation. Rule through certainty, even if certainty must be manufactured. Every gesture, every word, every alliance, calculated like a mentats equation. A child learning that crowns weigh more than they shine. The Imperium at that time was a crucible of factions and ambitions. Great houses maneuvered through the Landsraad like predators circling wounded prey, each seeking spice, star systems, and standing. The Spacing Guild, cloaked in navigational monopoly, floated above politics yet shaped every decision beneath it. Their navigators, dependent on spice, demanded stability, trade, and tribute. To cross the stars, one bowed to the Guild. To survive politics, one bowed to the Emperor. Balance, delicate as a knife edge. Then there were the Bene Gesserit, veiled architects of bloodlines. Breeding programs spanning centuries. Whispers woven into royal marriages like poison into honey. A sisterhood waiting, patient as dunes before a storm. They predicted Shaddam would be a useful piece. Predictable. Proud. A man whose fears they could shape, whose lineage could produce the one they sought. But the Bene Gesserit, for all their sight, could not predict desperation. For Shaddam's rise was not the natural succession of a beloved heir. It was hastened, sharpened, by betrayal. Elrood 9 did not die peacefully. Villainy followed hidden channels, carried by countless hands yet owned by one ambition. Some chronicles whisper cyanide. Others speak of a slow poison, Chowmurky, a noble's assassination hidden beneath wine and prescription. And in every telling, one truth returns like breath in a tomb. Shaddam ascended by removing the obstacle that raised him. This is where context shifts, where myth meets marrow. For his reign was built not on triumph, but on fear of losing what was stolen. A man who claims a throne is proud. A man who takes it becomes paranoid. His coronation glittered with ceremony. Banners unfurled like burning suns. Choirs echoed across Khitan's imperial gardens, where fountains flowed like liquid crystal. But behind every smile stood suspicion. Which noble knew the truth? Which sister of the Bene Gesserit held evidence? Which mentat had calculated the price of ambition? And so Shaddam built walls, invisible, deliberate. He fed rivalries within the Landsraad, ensuring no house grew strong enough to challenge him. He elevated some, crushed others, yet never fully destroyed, for a destroyed enemy cannot be controlled. Better a rival who needs you than a martyr who inspires rebellion. He strengthened the Sardaukar, warriors forged in misery, trained in the storms of Seleucus Secundus, where only the ruthless survived. Their presence became the Emperor's voice when diplomacy failed. Not an army, a warning, a reminder that mercy was optional. Meanwhile, the Guild watched from behind film-metal veils, noting every decree. Their dependency on spice made Arrakis the fulcrum of all future wars, a single desert planet holding the leash of empire. Shaddam knew this. He also knew the Atreides grew too beloved, too noble, too dangerous. House Harkonnen, cruel but loyal to corruption, was easier to wield like a blade. So the stage was set, an emperor crowned by blood. A political ecosystem held together by anxiety and intrigue. Houses balanced on the edge of survival. No truth, only performance. No loyalty, only leverage. The chronicle till now is simple. A young ruler rises, maintains order, secures his reign. But beneath these polished events grows a darker seed. The realization that power gained through manipulation must be continuously maintained with greater manipulation. Every success demanded another secret. Every secret is another lie. Every lie is another enemy. And still, the Landsraad bowed. Not because they trusted him, but because they feared the world that might replace him. This was the Emperor's brilliance. This was his curse. For in securing his rule through fear, Shaddam created a system in which fear itself became the only true sovereign, and fear demands sacrifice. And the first sacrifice was always stability. The mood tightens. The first crack in the throne is now visible. Power, once seized, must be fed. Like a worm beneath the sand, it burrows deeper, hungrier, unseen. Shaddam IV understood this, and so he built a lattice of control so intricate that even allies became instruments, even loyalty became currency. But control is not peace. Control is tension held still. And in the stillness, something began to tremble. House Atreides, honorable, steady, dangerously admired. Their banners lifted hearts rather than chains. Their voice in the Landsraad was a reason where others to shout ambition. Duke Leto, calm as deep water, became everything Shaddam was not. not feared, but trusted. And trust, in an empire of suspicion, is blasphemy. The emperor watched as nobles gravitated toward Atreides' diplomacy. He saw the guild speak more softly in Leto's presence. He heard Bene Gesserit whispers naming Caladan as an island of dignity in a sea of treachery. No decree declared Atreides a threat, yet a threat radiated from them like sunlight from dawn. So Shaddam made his decision. If admiration could rival fear, admiration must be broken. He turned to House Harkonnen, brutal, ruthless, and thirsty for revenge after years of humiliation under Atreides' ascendancy. Baron Vladimir Harkonnen became the Emperor's shadow hand, a serpent tasked with poisoning a blooming garden. Spice wealth, military resources, political favor, all flowed to GD Prime like blood into a predator's veins. Not openly, not boldly, but through deniable channels, buried beneath trade agreements and secret audiences. The Landsraad saw stability. The Emperor saw a weapon. Then came Arrakis, the fulcrum of the universe, the throne of spice, the heartbeat of commerce, prophecy, addiction, and survival. Shaddam ordered a transfer of power. The Atreides would replace the Harkonnens as stewards of the desert planet. On the surface, it was a gift, a recognition of prestige, a gesture of imperial trust. But beneath the sand lay the trap, a planet soaked in Harkonnen sabotage. Fedaykin whispers begin to stir in Freeman caves. Guild navigators are watching for tremors in possibility, an invitation disguised as honor, and an execution hidden within ceremony. Leto accepted because refusal meant weakness, because an emperor cannot be contradicted without consequence, because hope is a drug more dangerous than spice. Shaddam smiled behind velvet curtains. No war declared, no rebellion crushed, just chess and checkmate in the making. Yet even the most perfect trap contains an overlooked hinge. Shaddam calculated military strength, economic dependency, and political loyalty. He counted ships, soldiers, treaties, and harvest projections. But he did not account for something he could not measure: belief. On Arrakis, Shaddam saw only spice. He did not see destiny. He saw desert tribes as inconvenient natives, not as a people forged by struggle into steel. He saw sandworms as resources, not gods. He saw Jessica and Paul as pawns in the Bene Gesserit schema, not as divergences capable of rewriting prophecy. His trap was perfect, until the universe placed Paul Atreides inside it. And so, the conflict deepened. The Emperor tightened his grip, unaware that the grip itself was the spark. Fear became not the tool of his rule, but the architect of his downfall. He unleashed Sardaukar in secret, masked in Harkonnen livery. He sanctioned betrayal so total that even stones on Arrakis shuddered beneath it. He birthed a war to preserve peace. The Atreides fell. The desert rose. And the Emperor, safe in his palace of mirrors, believed the game was won. But a new rumor slithered across the Imperium like a chilling wind. A boy survived. A freeman worshipped him. A name echoed in smoky sieges beneath the moon. This was no longer politics. This was a prophecy awakening. Shaddam, once a predator, became prey to possibilities he could not quantify. He had built a universe where every house feared him, and now feared something more. Now we stand at the edge of the blade. An emperor who must choose between power and survival, between the throne he owns and the destiny rising to consume it. For the trap was never meant to hold a prophet, and the prophet had already begun to walk. The air changes, quieter, wider, like standing at the center of a storm after the roar has passed and only the truth remains. Now the chronicle shifts from event to essence. History speaks of battles, treaties, betrayals, but beneath those visible currents lies Herbert's deeper river. Power is not possession. Power is dependency. And dependency is the chain that binds both ruler and ruled. Shaddam IV did not lose his throne at Arrakis. He lost it long before, the day he chose fear as a foundation. For fear obeys only when constantly fed, and an empire that feeds on fear must starve eventually. So let us unfold the meaning. 1. Power built on tension cannot breathe. Shaddam believed balance came from keeping houses nervous, uncertain, and divided. In his view, unity was a danger, because unity could turn against him. But division breeds not safety, but instability. He created a Landsraad where survival depended on subterfuge. A guild that navigated not just space, but treachery. A sisterhood forced to play deeper games to compensate. He forged a universe where no one could trust, therefore no one could grow. Harmony became impossible. Progress became stagnant. The Imperium glittered on the surface, yet rotted underneath. A throne atop a crack is not secure, it only appears to be. And appearance is the most fragile form of power. Every decree Shaddam issued strengthened his position in the moment, but weakened the structure beneath him in the long arc of history. This is Herbert's warning. Control is not stability. Control is compression. And everything compressed eventually explodes. A universe suffocating under one man's paranoia did what pressure always does. It found release. 2. Shaddam defeated himself by fearing the Atreides more than the Imperium's decay. Leto was not his enemy. He was the mirror Shaddam refused to face. Where Shaddam ruled by suspicion, Leto governed by honor. Where Corrino's policy created fear, Atreides' leadership sparked loyalty. Shaddam wanted obedience. Leto inspired devotion. And devotion, not fear, is the seed from which lasting power grows. In destroying Atreides' influence, Shaddam removed the only counterweight that kept the Landsraad from collapsing. He extinguished a light, and the resulting darkness made room for a prophet. He ended a dynasty and opened the path for a legend. 3. The Emperor's greatest weapon became the tool of his undoing. Spice monopoly, guild dependency, Sardaukar, all pillars of imperial dominance, and all three fell to the same paradox. The more Shaddam relied on them, the more brittle his power became. He believed if he owned Arrakis, he owned the guild. But spice addiction does not create loyalty, it creates resentment. The guild tolerated Corrino rule not because they respected it, but because they had no alternative. Until Muad'Dib gave them one. He believed the Sardaukar would forever terrify the great houses. But terror loses its teeth when someone emerges unafraid. A warrior culture born from brutality cannot dominate a desert culture born from extinction. The Freemen did not fear death, they understood it. And understanding is power deeper than violence. He believed prophecy was a myth. Yet myth is the most dangerous force in a stagnant empire. Myth gives hopeless people a future. And the moment the future belongs to someone else, the throne becomes irrelevant. 4. Herbert is not telling the story of an emperor. He is telling the story of a system that creates its own executioner. The Imperium was a closed loop. Spice for space, space for commerce, commerce for power, power for spice. A circle so perfect it became suffocating. No evolution, no threat, no change, and therefore no renewal. Stagnation births revolution. Oppression births messiahs. Fear births faith. Shaddam tried to preserve an old world, and in doing so, summoned a new one. History did not destroy him. History merely waited for him to finish destroying himself. This is not simply Dune. This is an empire everywhere. Rome feared its generals more than its enemies. The Ottomans strangled their heirs to prevent civil war, and created one anyway. Monarchies of Earth fell not from invasion, but from calcified power and systems unable to adapt. And we see it now, even outside fiction. Institutions that cling rather than evolve, leaders who silence critique rather than learn from it. Fear masquerading as authority. Stability masking decay. Shaddam is not an alien ruler in a far-off future. He is the archetype of every leader who values control more than growth. 5. Why does the Emperor's trap matter? Because the greatest prison is not built of walls, but of assumptions. Because rulers fall when they confuse domination with destiny. Because empires die when they lack the courage to change. And because any system, no matter how vast, rests on a single truth. Power is not the throne. Power is the narrative people believe about the one who sits on it. Paul Atreides did not seize power because he was strong. He seized it because the universe was ready to believe in him. And belief spreads faster than armies, sharper than Sardaukar blades, deeper than imperial decrees. Shaddam had fear. Paul had faith. And faith, once awakened, cannot be conquered. The Emperor's trap was flawless. But flawless things break all at once. The tone softens, less judgment, more reflection, like turning a relic in trembling hands. Shaddam IV was not merely a villain, a tyrant, paranoid king. He was human, and therefore tragic. A man who wanted stability so desperately that he strangled it in his grasp. A man who built a prison for others and died inside it himself. Perhaps the most haunting truth of all is this. He could have chosen differently. Trust instead of fear. Unity instead of division. Evolution instead of stasis. But power, once tasted, is addictive as spice. And the one who fears losing it most will always lose it fastest. So the chronicles close with a whisper. In trying to prevent change, Shaddam brought change. In trying to stop prophecy, he fulfilled it. In trapping his enemies, he trapped himself. And history, cold, patient, merciless, recorded the lesson. The throne is not victory. The throne is the test. And only those who evolve survive it. The voice falls to a quieter register, like the last ember in a great fire, still glowing, still alive. So ends the chronicle of a man who ruled a universe yet could not rule his own fear. Shaddam IV, golden lion of a fading age. He built an empire of trembling loyalties, suspended on threads of suspicion, anchored by the illusion of control. For a time, it glittered. For a time, it endured. But even the brightest throne becomes shadow when the soul that sits upon it cannot see beyond itself. The Landsraad bowed because it feared collapse without him. The Spacing Guild obeyed because spice chained them more tightly than a treaty. The Bene Gesserit tolerated his reign because plans older than memory required patience. And all the while, the Emperor mistook compliance for loyalty, a fatal confusion, costly as blood. When Muad'Dib rose from the desert like a new sun, that illusion broke. Not through armies, not through decree, but through belief, the one force no empire can bind. The moment people believed in something greater than the throne ceased to matter. And so history repeats its quiet verdict. Power that fears change will be consumed by it. Power that clings becomes brittle. Power that refuses to evolve fractures. Shaddam's legacy is not simply a fall. It is a mirror, polished by time, darkened by consequence. Look into it, and we glimpse every leader who trades trust for control, every nation that chooses stability over growth, every age that grips too tightly and is shattered by the future it feared to embrace. The Imperium did not fall with him. It transformed, as all things must, because the true nature of power is not permanence. It is an adaptation, and history rewards not the one who dominates, but the one who dares to change. If these chronicles move you, if the shifting sands of empire and prophecy call to something in your spirit, return to the archive. Walk again through myth and memory, through war and revelation. There are more histories to unearth. More truths are buried beneath spice and time. Subscribe, and remember, history always repeats, even in the Imperium.